When every break is seemingly going your way and you're just about winning every single one-run game, sometimes the tides switch the other direction. And that's what happened on Tuesday night as the Phillies come back to walk it off against the Orioles in the ninth inning. I'll recap the game, plus talk about where the Orioles stand with their lineup at this point. Coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today is Wednesday, July 26th, 2023, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap a tough Orioles loss as they fall 4-3 to the Philadelphia Phillies on Tuesday night. As the Phils score 2 in the bottom of the ninth to come back and walk it off against the O's. I'll get you the 5 things you need to know from that one, including another big hit from Ryan O'Hearn, Ryan Mountcastle having a big day, and Gunnar Henderson leaving with another back issue in the 8th inning. Then we'll do a check-in on the Orioles order. On yesterday's episode, kind of talked about the starting pitching, where the O's sit about 100 games in. Now we'll talk the lineup because they got a couple of guys on the IL, a couple of guys dealing with injuries. Where do all these guys stand, the young guys and the veterans, heading into kind of the stretch run of this season? But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Sleeper. Swing for the fences on Sleeper picks, and you could win up to 100 times your money. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDON, and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. So we start today with an Orioles loss. Unfortunately, final score, Phillies 4, Orioles 3 on a walk-off at Citizens Bank Park in Philly on Tuesday night. With the loss, this series gets evened up at 1 game apiece. The rubber match will be tonight as the O's will go for a series win. But with the L for the Orioles, they drop to 62-39 on the season. The Rays did defeat the Marlins on Tuesday night as well, which means the Orioles lead in the AL East is now just a game and a half over Tampa Bay. But I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from the Orioles 4-3 loss to the Phillies. And the first thing you need to know is, listen, it didn't end up being the game-winning hit because of what happened in the bottom of the ninth. But Ryan O'Hearn just continues to have an unbelievably clutch season for the Orioles. O'Hearn comes up there in the top of the 8th inning in a 2-2 game, facing a lefty once again, and a very good and very tough lefty at that in Matt Strahm. And O'Hearn delivers, gets an 0-2 hanging breaking ball, crushes it into right center field for a solo homer. Another home run against the lefty for O'Hearn. Had the big one that ended up being the game-winning hit on Sunday in Tampa. This one was 1 out away from being the game winner, but that ball was launched into right center field. And again, that was the one thing the Orioles were kind of doing with O'Hearn this season, is hiding him from left-handers. I don't know if you need to do it as much anymore because he continues to get big hits against lefties. This one, 100 miles per hour off the bat, 386 feet for his 9th homer of the season. And if the O's would have closed it out, it would have been his 3rd game-winning hit in the Orioles' last 4 games. Second thing you need to know from this one is that, listen, Ryan Mountcastle is watching what Ryan O'Hearn is doing, and he's been doing his absolute best to avoid losing all of his playing time to the veteran lefty. Mountcastle in this game was great, reaching base all 4 times, 2 for 2 with a couple of singles, a couple of walks, 2 hard hit balls. He's been really good since coming back from the vertigo. Ryan Mountcastle is quietly 10 for 27, hitting well over 300 since he returned the game before the All-Star break. And in this one, he was just squaring up the ball. And it was coming against some right-handers as well, which, I mean, he's been crushing lefties per usual, but has struggled a bit. And by struggled a bit, I mean struggled mightily against the right-handers this year. But in the 2nd inning, had a single off Taijuan Walker, 97 miles per hour. In the third inning, had another single off Taijuan Walker, 106 miles per hour, then drew 2 more walks later in the game as well. It was just his third multi-walk game of the season, and the first time all year Ryan Mountcastle has reached base 4 times in one game. He is seeing what O'Hearn is doing, and he is trying to keep his spot and doing a pretty good job on the roster at this point. Third thing you need to know from this one was the thing that happened in this game that was honestly worse than the walk-off loss in the bottom of the ninth. It was that Gunnar Henderson left this game in the 8th inning. He hit a ground ball to first, and it was fielded by Bryce Harper, who was flipping it to the pitcher, Matt Strahm, and it was a race to the bag, and Strahm just beat Henderson, like by a half a step at first base. And when Henderson lunged for the base, he kind of did hit like the front part of the bag. And when his foot came down, he didn't hit fully on the bag. It was kind of the front part of the foot hit the bag, the heel of the foot hit the dirt. And when that happened, it looked like he just jarred a little bit the wrong way. Now, he tried to call himself safe. They ended up being out. And then when he came back to the dugout, you could start to see him just, I wouldn't call it limping, but just walking a little bit gingerly when he got back into the dugout. He came back out there and was in the game initially defensively for the next inning. But then the inning after, he was replaced by Jorge Mateo at shortstop. The Orioles, right at the end of the game, called it lower back discomfort. Now, it's a little concerning for Gunnar because he's had lower back discomfort already once this year, missed a couple of games back in June with the same kind of issue. Hopefully, this one, again, is just a couple of games, but we will obviously monitor this because Henderson really has been the Orioles' best hitter for the last 2 months. They need him in this lineup. They cannot afford to lose him. And so that was honestly worse than the loss itself in this game. Hopefully, it's just something minor for Gunnar Henderson. Fourth thing you need to know from this one is that Kyle Gibson got the start against his old team. Remember, pitched with the Phillies for the last year and a half, got his National League championship ring before the game on Monday. He pitched like the guy that the Orioles need him to be down the stretch. And that's what we've been talking about with Kyle Gibson over the last few starts, but he did it again in this one. 6 innings for Gibson, allowing just 2 runs on 4 hits with 5 strikeouts and no walks. He allowed a run in the 3rd inning when it looked like things were going to get away from him, but he crept out of a jam and then just kind of hung a changeup with 2 outs to Bryce Harper, the second to last pitch he threw, and Harper hit a solo homer in the 6th to tie the game. But other than that, Gibson was awesome. Just 3 hard hit balls against him in 6 innings. Had the changeup working. That pitch was looking good. The sweeper didn't have the command early, but kind of found it in the 5th and 6th innings. Yeah, he only had 10 whiffs, but he mixed his pitches incredibly well in this game. The velocity was even a little up. Got himself through 6 innings. He's now thrown a team-high 127 innings on the year. That is top 10 in all of baseball. If he keeps doing this, he's going to stay in this rotation and is going to be huge for the Orioles down the stretch. And the 5th and final thing you need to know from this one is that it was a tale of 2 bullpens for the Orioles in this game. After Kyle Gibson left, Shintaro Fujinami came on, and he showed you why the Orioles acquired him. Despite having an ERA close to 9, he showed you exactly why the O's went and got him. Fujinami goes 6 up and 6 down in the 7th and 8th innings with 3 strikeouts in this one and only 1 hard hit ball. Only took him 21 pitches to get through those 2 innings. That 4-seamer was big time. It was 99 to 100, got 3 whiffs on that. And then the splitter was ridiculous. 2 whiffs on the splitter, both of them on a just unbelievable strikeout against Kyle Schwarber that ended the 8th inning, the final batter he faced. That splitter was 92 to 94 with incredible run. It kind of looked like Felix Bautista's pitch. Like that looked like a mini Felix in the 7th and 8th. That was awesome from Fujinami. However, speaking of Felix, he once again was not available for the Orioles on Tuesday night. And I get, the questions, why was he not available for this game? He didn't pitch Monday night because he wasn't available. Well, even though he wasn't available Monday, if you pitch him on Tuesday, that is 5 games in 7 days for Felix Bautista. The Orioles do not want to do that to him, at least at this point in the season. I know it's July, but they're going to wait till September to do that. He has worked a lot lately, and I get that Yenye Cano did come in, and Cano himself, that made it 5 games in 7 days. But over the weekend, Cano threw 11 fewer pitches than Bautista did. That almost amounts in terms of workload-wise to one fewer outing than Bautista. So that is why Cano was available and Bautista wasn't. And unfortunately, it just didn't work out. Cano gets 2 outs with the runner on first, and Bryson Stott just lines that ball into the corner where nobody's playing to tie the game. Yes, Jorge Mateo should have made that play at short, should have sent the game to extra innings. He didn't. And then Bohm gets the walk-off single for the Phillies to win it 4-3. Yes, the Orioles did have the bases loaded with no outs in the second inning and didn't score any more runs. I get that that hurts as well. But sometimes, as I said at the top, you've won a lot of close games. You've won a lot of one-run games. You've had a lot of breaks go your way. And when you're playing another good team, I mean, the Phillies are primed to get back into the playoffs this year after going to the World Series last year. Sometimes you're going to lose games like this. The Orioles have won a lot of games that look just like this season. They were kind of bound and due to lose one of these. Unfortunately, they were 1 out away from winning it and couldn't get it done. Not super concerned about Cano. We'll see kind of where the release point was when they get the numbers up tomorrow. Yeah, it wasn't his best stuff, wasn't his worst. He's not the pitcher he was early in the year, but he's still good. It is what it is. The O's will go for the series later today. But yes, it was a little concerning that the O's didn't get more than 1 run in that second inning against Taijuan Walker and left the bases loaded. And it was a little concerning that Gunnar Henderson left the game and that Aaron Hicks is now on the injured list, which we'll talk about in a bit. So what do we see from the Orioles offense here? Right? 101 games into the season, getting close to the trade deadline. I don't think many people think the Orioles will try to acquire any kind of hitter at the deadline, but if Hicks and Mullins are out long-term, or even Henderson is, maybe they would. So let's kind of take stock of the Orioles lineup. That's coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Sleeper. Sleeper is a great new way to play daily fantasy sports because you can win 100 times your money on daily fantasy baseball. Sleeper is now offering up to a 100 times payout for up to 8 pick contests. Choose as many as 8 players that you like and pick more or less on your favorite stats like homers, strikeouts, hits, and more. Get your picks right and you could win big. And hey, you know, the entries, they can be made in 30 seconds or less. You go right under the app, pick your players, submit it, you're done. It's that easy. And there's safe and fast withdrawals of your money that you win. So use promo code LOCKEDON and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. So the Orioles fall to the Phillies in walk-off fashion 4-3 on Tuesday night. Kind of a heartbreaker for the O's, but hey, the Orioles have given a lot of other teams heartbreak losses recently. So I'm just at the point where I kind of felt like they were due for one, right? They could have done more to win the game, felt like they did enough to win it, but what happens, happens. They were 1 out away, did not get it done. They'll look to win the series today. But wanted to check in on the Orioles hitters here on this episode. And it's seemingly kind of a good time to do it, right? Because Aaron Hicks just went on the IL. Gunnar Henderson just left the game with back discomfort. And Jorge Mateo just made a lot more people mad on Tuesday night. Now, I kind of did the check-in on the starting pitchers on Tuesday's episode. Make sure to go back and listen to that one. And I'm going to do the relievers tomorrow. That's probably the most in-depth one because the O's are going to need to add to that bullpen core come trade deadline next week. But the hitters seem to be, right, maybe not the most locked-in spot because the O's still have some guys they could call up, and they're dealing with some injuries right now. But it would seem least likely, at least to me, that the Orioles would trade for any kind of position player at the deadline on Tuesday. Now, we'll see if the Hicks injury changes that, but right now that's where they're at. So I just wanted to run through all the hitters. We'll start with the infielders, then get to the outfielders, kind of talk about what they've done this year and where they stand currently with the O's and what their role could be moving forward. So I just want to get out of the way to start. I'm not really going to go in depth into Adley Rutschman or Gunnar Henderson. Yes, it's unfortunate that Henderson left the game. I hope it's minor. He just misses a couple of days. Those two guys, Adley 123, Gunnar 124 on their WRC pluses. Again, all these stats I'm going to read out are coming into play on Tuesday, so they do not include Tuesday's game. They're going to be in there every day as long as Henderson's healthy. Don't really need to kind of analyze their spot on the team. They are the young stars of this ball club. But let's then go to the other catcher, James McCann. Listen, it hasn't been the offense the O's would like. Hit 198, 51 WRC plus at 125 plate appearances. He's basically been almost as bad as Robinson Chirinos was last year. But that's offensively. Defensively, he's been much better. Been about an average framer, average pitch blocker. That's way better than Trinos was. Trinos was one of the worst framers in baseball. And he's been a good thrower. He showed out that McCannon back there. Way better than Robinson Trinos. He's been an upgrade. I would have liked him to be a little more of an upgrade, but he's been an upgrade. Did a couple of good things with the bat over the weekend in Tampa. He's fine right there as the Orioles backup catcher. Then there's Ryan O'Hearn, who once again almost played hero on Tuesday, hitting the big homer. And even coming into Tuesday, right? Hitting 311, 140 WRC plus. Now, he's not walking as much as you'd like, just a 6% walk rate. But his 56% hard hit rate, which went up on Tuesday, 9th best in baseball among players with at least 100 balls in play. 9th best in baseball. He's sitting just above Vladdy Jr. and Yordan Alvarez in that stat right now. He is just mashing the baseball. It's incredible what the O's have done. And right now, there's a little worry that he could slow down a bit. Like a 361 BABIP is a little high, and the 6% walk rate isn't great. But he's not striking out at a super high clip. He's putting the ball in play, and he's hitting it hard. Left-handed hitter at Camden Yards. I mean, I still don't see him starting against left-handers, but he can hit them when you need to, as he showed the last couple of days. He's in there for the long haul at this point. Could it come crashing down? It could. He's got a lot of track record with the Royals being a bad hitter. But the O's have changed something, and it's working, and he's in there for the long haul. And then there's Ryan Mountcastle, who is definitely trying to make sure he still has a spot. He did a good job, as I talked about, Tuesday night, 2 for 2, couple of singles, couple of walks. 88 WRC plus on the season coming into Tuesday's game, but he's been pretty good since coming back. Now hitting almost 340 in his 29 plate appearances since returning, a 150 WRC plus. 7 strikeouts, but he does have 2 walks. He also has a 176 WRC plus against lefties this year in about 100 plate appearances. Again, WRC plus is a stat that it's weighted runs created plus. Does a nice job of kind of combining everything a hitter can do, from hitting for power, hitting for average, getting on base, working walks. Kind of combines it all into a run creation stat. 100 is league average, so 176 for Mountcastle against lefties. 76% better than a league average hitter against lefties this year. So he's been good. Also a 42 WRC plus against righties. So maybe don't play him against righties that much, but even if he's in a platoon with O'Hearn, I think Mountcastle could hold his roster spot just because he's starting to swing it better since he returned from the vertigo issue. Then there's Adam Frazier. Just kind of been perfectly average, been right around a league average hitter, right around a 100 WRC plus all year, hit the ball hard, at a couple of hits on Tuesday night, 237 average, 12 homers, his career high. Strikeouts are super low as usual. Barrel percentage is up. He's been one of the most unlucky hitters in baseball. He's got the largest difference between his actual batting average and his expected batting average. His expected batting average is around 270, 280. The real one's at 237. So expect him to get better as the year goes on. And listen, he's hitting 286 in July coming into Tuesday. He's doing good things. He's getting on base. He's putting the ball in play. 4 strikeouts, no walks in July. Well, now it's 5 strikeouts, no walks in July in 50 plate appearances in the month. He puts the ball in play. He's a different hitter than the O's have anywhere else. I like what he's doing right now. The defense is concerning. The fact that his defense has completely tanked at second base, something to monitor, but I'm okay with him in the lineup at this point. Ramon Arias. Don't really know what to do with Ramon Arias at this point. Hitting 251, 98 WRC plus, so basically a league average hitter. 4 homers. The power's kind of gone away this year. Defense has gotten a little worse. He is not the Gold Glove defender he was last year. He's been about league average at third base defensively. He's been good at second base. He's still been a good defender, but not the Gold Glove level he was last season. And the bat is a little tick down. The defense is a little tick down. I don't really know where he stands with the O's right now. Like, he's hitting much better against righties. He's kind of been a reverse splits guy, hitting 195 against lefties and 282 against righties. He's also 4 for 24 since the All-Star break, so hasn't been swinging it super well. He's kind of playing in and out sparingly. If the Orioles really needed to get somebody else up on this roster, I could see them DFAing Ramon Arias. I mean, he is out of options, and he gives you some versatility, and he helps the team. I just don't know about him. I got to keep a watch on Ramon Arias here. He's in kind of a weird kind of purgatory spot with the O's roster. Then there's Jordan Westburg. Listen, He didn't look great at the plate Tuesday night, looked kind of overmatched with Taijuan Walker, did draw a walk in the ninth inning, but just over 70 plate appearances, hitting about 260, been just above average at the plate so far in his short time at the big leagues. Defense has been great. Already 4 outs above average in the field. That's really good for his short amount of playing time. He's been really good at third base and second base defensively. I like him in there almost every day at this point. So I guess we'll finish infielder-wise with Jorge Mateo, right? We got to have the Jorge Mateo conversation. We won't have the long version right now because especially with Gunnar Henderson having a little back issue, they are not going to DFA Jorge Mateo today. Like, at the very least, if they're thinking about doing it, they'll wait till Gunnar's healthy, just so they have another healthy shortstop at this point. Now, had to come into the game for Gunnar. Grounds out, and then has the double clutch play at short, which should have sent the game to extras and couldn't make the play. Hitting 212, 24% strikeout rate, 65 WRC plus. Yeah, he didn't make the play at short, and yeah, he's had a couple of plays he should have made recently that he didn't, but he's still been metrically good at shortstop. Like, he's still a good defender over there. Don't get me wrong, he has not been, clearly, eye test and the numbers, has not been as good as he was last year at short. Last year, though, he was ridiculous. He was the best shortstop in the game defensively. Now, it's not so sure. He's got 23 stolen bases, but he doesn't really get on base enough to make it work. At this point, what Mateo is on the roster is he's going to start against lefties because he's still hitting lefties, right? Like, he's hitting 299 with a 120 WRC plus against lefties. He's been good. And he's going to pinch run. He's still a weapon as long as he's healthy on the base pass. Now, I think after getting kind of spiked in the shin on Monday night, it might have been bothering him a little bit. That may have been why he did not attempt to steal when he was on first base in the ninth inning on Tuesday night. But at this point, he's a play versus lefties and pinch runner guy. I get why he's on the roster, right? It's really enticing to have him there, especially if the season gets late, to pinch run him. It's nice to have a guy who hits lefties still as well as he does, despite having basically no chance against a right-hander when he's up there. And I understand why he's on the roster. I haven't made up my personal opinion yet at this point, like whether or not I want him off the roster. I kind of teeter back and forth, but I get both sides. I really do understand that he needs to go. The defense is down. He's not getting on base enough to make the speed worth it. And do you really want to roster a guy who's basically a glorified pinch runner? Like, at this point, he can still hit lefties. So he's still giving you something else. And the defense is still good enough that he's giving you something else. But it's continuously trending downward, right? And he's making more gaffes defensively. It's going to be a real tough decision. He's out of options, so you can't just send him down to AAA. You got to DFA him, and 100% guaranteed someone is going to claim him. At the very least, a rebuilding bad team to play him at shortstop every day and see if they can kind of rekindle the magic he had at times last year and then in April of this year. I don't think they're ready to let go of him yet, just to let you know, especially with Gunnar, maybe on the mend for a little bit. I haven't formed the full Jorge Mateo opinion, but it's a conversation we're going to continue to have. So who are the other infield options? Well, it's Joey Ortiz in AAA, right? Just killing it at AAA. Plays just as good, if not better, defense than Jorge Mateo. The one thing he doesn't bring, doesn't crush lefties quite as much as Mateo does, and doesn't have the speed Mateo does, but otherwise, you could easily make the argument to put Ortiz over Mateo on this team right now. And if Henderson would have to go on the IL for any reason, we're going to see Jorge Mateo here. And then you got, like, Terran Vavra and Connor Norby down there if you need them as well. Cesar Prieto in AAA too. But it's kind of where the infield's looking for the O's at this point. Unless Gunnar Henderson is going to miss significant time, which I don't think he will, I don't see the Orioles really adding to the infield from outside of the deadline. They just got too much talent in the system at this point. But we got to also talk outfielders. That's where there's a little bit more question marks right now. Mullins on the IL. Hayes on the IL. Cowser not getting hot yet. And Austin Hayes going ice cold. What are the O's going to do in the outfield in the short term and the long term? Talk about that coming up next to finish off the pod. So we're checking in on the Orioles offense after, they did leave the bases loaded with no outs in the second and only scored 3 runs, and that kind of hurt them in the loss on Tuesday night. But the Orioles still have a chance to win this series as they've got the rubber game tonight against the Phillies. A little bit earlier start time, 6:05 p.m. Eastern time start. Orioles and Phillies game 3. The O's are going to send their current ace out to the mound. Kyle Bradish takes the hill with his 3.05 ERA, and he will take on the left-hander Ranger Suarez, who gets the start in this game for the Phillies. Suarez, the 27-year-old lefty, missed a good chunk of the season early with injury, but since returning, 13 starts, 73 innings, has a 4.07 ERA. Although his last start was a little shaky against Cleveland over the weekend, 5 innings, 4 runs, 8 hits, 5 Ks, and 2 walks. Expect to see, the guys like Jorge Mateo and potentially Ryan McKenna in that lineup against the lefty on Wednesday. And you can listen to every single pitch of the Orioles' hometown radio broadcast of Game 3 between the O's and the Phils with the SXM app through SiriusXM. Just download the app and search Orioles. And I mentioned Ryan McKenna right there because he is back with the team as we go to the outfielders now to kind of do the Orioles outfielder check-in to finish off the episode. Ryan McKenna is here because Aaron Hicks was placed on the injured list on Tuesday. We saw Hicks leave the game after making that diving quote-unquote catch early in Monday's game. It is a left hamstring strain. The Orioles thought it was just going to be a cramp. That's what they were hoping. It turns out to be a strain. Now, Aaron Hicks did say to the media on Tuesday that he feels pretty good. He feels it's a very low-grade strain, and he thinks he could even be back when those exact 10 days are up on the injured list. But a hamstring strain is not something to mess around with. I would expect it's probably going to take more than the 10 days, but we will obviously monitor that situation. Now, for Aaron Hicks, since coming over, signing with the Orioles after the Yankees released him, signed with the O's right after Cedric Mullins went on the IL the first time at the end of May, Hicks has been good with the Orioles. I mean, a 119 WRC plus, 252 average, and 152 plate appearances, a 13% walk rate is really good. He's been okay in the outfield. He showed off the arm. He's patrolled center. Hasn't been amazing. Otherwise, though, he's kind of cooled off lately. Like had a 76 WRC plus in July, so he was 24% worse than a league average hitter in the month of July. And his walk rate was down to 8%, strikeout rate up to 27% in July. So he wasn't the hitter he was early with the O's, but he was still contributing, and it was still huge to have him without Cedric Mullins. So now you're without Mullins, who has been taking BP, but he still can't run, at least to full strength at this point. So they're going to keep him on the IL with that groin injury, kind of the second time he's injured that groin. And it's kind of in the dark right now about when he'll return because, again, he's hitting, he's doing everything else but running, but he needs to run to be out there on the bases and hitting and in center field. So there's certainly questions about center because Hicks is out for at least 10 days, and it could be more. And Mullins is out for we don't know how long. So for now, Ryan McKenna has been recalled, as I predicted on Tuesday's episode. Listen, he hadn't been too bad in the big leagues early this year before he got demoted. 253 average, 89 plate appearances. Not really much of a splits guy anymore. Like he used to crush lefties and not hit righties. Now his numbers are basically even, at least this year, against righties and lefties. You'll probably see him get the start in center field today with the lefty on the mound, however, just to see how he's doing. Wasn't tearing the cover off the ball exactly. Actually was kind of struggling a bit in AAA, but he's on the 40-man. He's your best option. But you do start to think, like, if Hicks is out for more than the 10 days, you've got kind of what will be a Cowser-McKenna platoon in center field right now. But is that good enough? Like, if the two of them are going to miss extended time and Cowser's struggling and McKenna is McKenna, you might need some help. I mean, looking at some of the options that could be there via trade for the Orioles in center field, Cody Bellinger could be on the market. I mean, a 144 WRC plus. He's been great for the Cubs. Mark Canha will be available from the Mets. Still plays solid defense, gets on base. Adam Duvall could be available from the Red Sox. He's been having a good season coming back from injury. Randall Grichuk with the Rockies been solid. Ramon Laureano, not very good, but he's available from the Athletics. And then, do you think about having Jorge Mateo play a little center field if you keep him on the roster? Do you think about maybe calling up Daz Cameron, who's currently in AAA, but not on the 40-man if McKenna doesn't work out? Do you think about maybe the Heston Kjerstad promotion at some point and you play more Austin Hayes and Cowser in center field and move Kjerstad to a corner? There's potential there. But these are all questions they have to answer. And for now, it's going to be McKenna and Cowser. And I think the Orioles will hope that the Hicks injury is kind of short-term and he'll be back soon. And then Mullins would be back shortly after. But here's the other issue right now. Cowser's not exactly tearing the cover off the ball, right? He did have 2 walks, which was nice to see on Tuesday night, but still hitting, about 120 through about 50 and change plate appearances since being called up. He's going to get better, but the center field defense isn't exactly spectacular. He's already got a -5 defensive run saved in the outfield. He's not the most trustworthy center fielder. I feel good about him in a corner, not so much in center, but he's had to play a lot of center with Mullins out. And then there's the Austin Hayes of it all. Yes, Austin was an all-star. And yes, Austin had an amazing first half. And yes, Hayes is still hitting 293 with a 117 WRC plus, and he had a big RBI double in the game on Tuesday night. But coming into play on Tuesday, Hayes in July was hitting 170 with a 30% strikeout rate. He was 6 for 41 since the All-Star break with a negative 10 WRC plus. That is not good. I'm hoping, obviously, we're not seeing the exact same thing that happened last year happen to Austin Hayes, where he's great in the first half and terrible in the second half. I'm hoping that's not the case. But so far, it hasn't been great, so you can't really rely on Hayes as much. I mean, he was hitting down at 7th in the order in Tuesday night's game. What's been happening in July? Well, the chase rate is way up. He knocked that thing way down early in the year. That's why his numbers were so good. Now he's chasing everything out of the zone. 47% chase rate in July. He was at, 36% last year, and it was bad last season. He's just whiffing more. He's chasing more. A little concerning there. So we're kind of at the point where Anthony Santander is the guy holding down the outfield. He's just been great all year. 262 average, 17 homers, 123 WRC plus coming into play Tuesday. You can rely on him in the middle of the order every single day. They don't love him playing right field all the time, and you get him out for a defensive replacement late in games. But there are some questions about the outfield right now, and we'll see what the O's want to do there, especially if Hicks is going to be out and Mullins is going to be out for longer than we think. But that's kind of your reset on the Orioles hitters right now. Like, the offense has been solid, not as good as it was early in the year, but they're getting more young talent here, and more young talent could be on the way for the Orioles. We just hope this Gunnar Henderson back issue isn't anything serious. But that's what we'll get to on tomorrow's episode. Certainly we'll get you any update we have on Gunnar Henderson. We'll talk draft pick signings. The Orioles were able to sign Jackson Baumeister, their competitive balance round pick, just before the deadline to an overslot deal. The deadline was on Tuesday. We'll talk about what the O's could do at the deadline regarding the outfield at this point. And we'll also break down the relief corps, a reset on the bullpen, and what the O's will need to do at next week's deadline. That's all coming up on tomorrow's episode. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.